at the time, and I made a note, and I didn't know it was as figure as high as that.
Absolutely.
$2.3 trillion.
See, even on YouTube, people can Google Rumsfeld 2.3 trillions lost, and it's right there. But we'll get that to you, Timothy. But go ahead. What do you think then that all this money is going?
There is a satellite government, and it is. I'm told. I originally thought it was. I think certainly the Americans have the upper hand. I would assume, since they've been the ones that were the first to develop the technology and so forth. But it is international in scope, and we're dealing with some very powerful people, some of whom I think are quite well known, but others from behind the scenes. And of course there's big money, vested interests, a very, very powerful control group, if you like.
Yeah. So what is what do you think personally is the agenda on I mean, it's impossible to know if these people are dealing, I guess, in one sense with alien factions as well at this point. I mean, we could be looking at a situation where human alien factions have teamed up together in order to, who knows, achieve their unified agenda or goals, or they might be separate, but they've chosen to team up for a certain period of time here because
you're very well informed.
Yeah.
You're absolutely spot on, Henrik.
Yeah.
I would like to discuss with you and the listeners the saga of amicizia. That is the Italian word for friendship. And there is a book about it. It's written in rather a muddled style. It's rather convoluted. A very complex story, and I'm in touch with some of the principal people who were involved. And there's a book called Mass Contacts. And I'm just looking around for the Italian version, which is better in a way. But anyway, the English translation is not terrific, and it's written it's in rather a confused way, because some of the participants, unfortunately, who were engaged in writing the book passed away. So it was left to a guy, Stefano Breccia, that's Breccia, who is, he's a professor. He's extremely well qualified in computer physics and computer sciences, and he's lectured in the former Soviet Union and South America, and of course in Italy. And he's very well connected, and he is one of many people, probably hundreds, who were involved in the so-called amicizia saga, which started in 1956 when human-type aliens began establishing contacts all over Italy with various people from all walks of life. We're not talking about politicians or various people, but people from all sorts of walks of life, including some elements of the police, the military. They were dealing with scientists, with all sorts of people, with a guy called Bruno Sammarticcia, who was a Catholic historian and scholar, who was familiar with one of the popes, and he was another person who was deeply involved. And these contacts, face-to-face, in-person contacts with human-type aliens, it went on for many years, and it still may be going on, but eventually it seemed to go from about 1956 to about the late 1970s, and then it seemed to have phased out, but the communications were still going on. I know that because I've been informed so. But some of these, they were all, or most of them, very, very similar, if not identical to human beings. I've got details of physiological data, which much of which is very similar to ours. Some of them are extremely tall, 3 meters. How about that, in height? There's even a photograph in the book of one of these beings. I shall probably be showing that, a color version of it in Amsterdam. And this was taken in about 1976 by by Bruno Sammarchicho, the Catholic scholar I've just mentioned, and he was a principal, one of the principals involved in this extraordinary saga. And there were smaller beings that were seen as well. Some of them were extremely down to earth, to coin a phrase.
Right.
They enjoyed, would you believe, some of them drank wine. Good for them.
Yeah.
And some of them even smoked. And of course, this challenges all our preconceptions about aliens. Oh, they do this. They wouldn't look like this. They wouldn't look like us. And oh, no, we wouldn't be able to. But some of them are extremely human, with a great sense of humor. The technology is phenomenal. It's described in great detail, and I have subsequently learned. I'm trying to study it because it is difficult for me, because I don't have any scientific or training in physics. But
sure.
One does need that to comprehend a lot of it. But
sure.
Now these people have established huge underground bases. I mean, one of them was at least 100 miles in length, under the underground and under the subterranean levels underneath the oceans around Italy. Specific locations are given, and they can create these bases very, very quickly with a technology which they don't use boring drills and things like that.
Sure.
You know,
Right.
They are able to compact matter, just separate matter to make a space, and the matter it joins together in a much denser, because it's been compacted by this process of creating a space under the ground, and it therefore provides protection in some of their huge bases from any kind of pressure above ground or coming from the sea or whatever. And they've taken quite a number of these people involved to their bases, and that some of those they're described in great detail. And indeed, I've spoken to one person who was frequently visiting one of these bases. In his case, a much smaller one, but there were large bases. There were women, there were youngsters, but apparently their lifespan was up to about 400 of our years, and they said that, you know, they've always been here, coming and going, and they mentioned where their origin was, you know, gave specifics about which star system they came from in the galaxy and so forth.
Yeah.
Their technology is just absolutely incredible, and but they are not perfect. These beings, for example, we hear about telepathic human beings, men and women, because they're women, definitely, as I say, were involved as well.
Yeah.
And quite a number of them were actually living here and working here in certain positions, even as university professors. One was head of a large telecommunications company. Some were scientists and others. But the problem was that they required our help. Remember, I mentioned earlier in this interview about the apparent conflict that's going on between alien species. They have asked us to help them. And this is one reason why some of them have allowed us to develop the technology, because they want us to help them deal with this very powerful. There are powerful enemy forces. I mean, it sounds like science fiction, Henrik, but this is what I have been led to believe, and I'm convinced it's the case.
Well, that's...
And they talk about one very, very powerful group that's hostile, and a lot of it is completely unbelievable. It causes us to revise a lot of our preconceptions about aliens, but. I've studied it very carefully now for over a year, and I think it's a very, very important development. And many of the people were sworn to secrecy by the aliens over a period of years, and they've only started talking about it from about 4 years ago, I'm told.
Mm.
And